Hi, here is Anu, and
Justine.
we are Ayurvedic practitioners, and today we're going to talk about fasting. Um, Ayurveda promotes fasting that is designed for individual needs. So, what is your idea about what are your understandings and thoughts and musings about fasting, Justine?
Well, I think that when people hear the word Ayurveda, they think about long fasting. They think, oh, people don't eat for like 5 days and, oh, it's like really challenging and really hard and it kind of scares people away. But personally, I like intermittent fasting and see that works best for most clients. And
Mm-hmm.
longer term fasting, I don't really recommend so much in colder northern climate where I'm living in here in Finland. How about you over there in London?
Well, there's options for everyone in here. It's like, um, it just depends on what you do in your life. What is, if you're a busy city worker in here, stressed out, and then small intermittent fasting could be a very, very good option for you because not only it does very good for the guts, but also be able to manage stress because the small intermittent fasting helps you to manage blood sugar in a way that you can tolerate the highs and lows, the peaks and valleys of blood sugar. But then let's say if you are menopausing, then, small intermittent fasting could go very, very well for you. Do kind of feeding and fasting rhythms with just 2 meals a day. But yes, if you're a sports person, you do lots of sports, and then as well, it's very, very good. Instead of constant snacking to keep your blood sugar levels high so you can perform, I advise to have 2 big meals a day, and that's it: late lunch and brunch and late lunch. So so it's never kind of complete fasting or dry fasting or just water, unless you are really seasoned faster, and that should be also something that happens occasionally. But just in a regular everyday life, depending on what your situation this life are, this small intermittent fasting is really the most powerful, the most cheapest, and the fastest way to fix almost anything.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned fastest and cheapest, because that's really like what people are looking towards in this modern society, right? What's fast and cheap?
Yeah, yeah,
And
just
we
stop
we don't
eating.
make any money telling you to do this, and
Yeah,
actually, you
exactly. So
know.
stop eating constantly. Yeah, just constant snacking is one of the worst things that you can do for your guts. So if you stop eating for 4 hours, you're not going to die. And if you can't stay 4 hours without eating, that means that you have a blood sugar issue, that you're not able to tolerate that, or you can't handle the sensation of hunger. And we should be able to do that. But lots of people are frightened of the sensation of hunger as if it was pain. But hunger is not pain. It's a sensation like tiredness. When you're tired, we know that, in a couple of hours I'll push on, soldier on, and I'll be able to go and rest. And all you have to do is manage this uncomfortable feeling. And hunger is like that. We're just conditioned to think by food industry that we have to constantly eat to keep the hunger away. And that's wrong. We need to be able to be with hunger. We're able to, go fasting and feasting, these periods, and tolerate it without even discomfort. It's just a sensation. So what I teach to my clients and students, obviously, is this little mantra about fasting, that when hunger comes, hunger is not pain. Hunger comes in waves, and it's a sign of good Agni. Yeah. So if you don't have a sensation of Agni, or you're trying to keep it away by eating constantly, by default, your Agni is down.
Yeah, and that's a good example, like for some people, if they have, some eaten something kind of funky or weird and had some digestive issues,
Mm.
sometimes the next day they don't feel hunger, and that's actually a sign that you need to give your body a rest and you need to fast a little bit. So, the body is smart. There's an intelligence there. And I think that's sometimes the only time that often people do fast is if, they're having some digestive complaint. But we don't have to wait for some sort of complaint to come. We can just do this regularly in our weekly cycle, try to fit it in there.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And it should be part of our everyday life, because when there's nothing where there's less load to digest in the guts, the gut then has time to process all the food that needs to go in a timely manner, but also to heal itself. So if you've eaten some rubbish, it's stress for the gut, and it needs more time to process that. And then there might be residues, so that it's very, Agni is able to take the nutrients and discard waste and be intelligent, recognizing what is waste. Because if Agni's intelligence goes down, or power goes down, then the the division process of nutrients and waste is also impaired. And then waste can seep into the bloodstream, can seep into the lacteals to go to the lymphatics, and then start clogging the liver and the rest of the system as well. And we know that name AMA as practitioners, Ayurvedic, and understanding of digestive toxins that have seeped into the blood. So so you need to give time for the gut to do its job, and then give it a rest overnight. So stop eating after 5, and then next time eat in the morning. You've given probably 16 hours of rest, and this is really the most powerful, as I say, fastest and cheapest, the most powerful way to deal with anything, because then overnight the body goes into self-regulation, or boosts its self-regulatory activities, so healing. So whatever is out of order is corrected, or the process starts, the correcting process starts there.
And to go back on the mention of those who are not able to fast, there's some issues with their blood sugar. If they feel really horrible, if they have to go more than 4 or 5 hours without eating, do you have any tips for those people, how to sort of exercise their fasting muscle, how to get to the point where they actually can start to intermittent fast more comfortably without feeling horrible?
Yeah, well, it's a gradual process, obviously. So if you're, used to snacking every hour, so then start, lengthening that gap, that fasting window, a little bit at a time. Yeah, and then choose snacks that are really easy to digest. So something like a fruit rather than a protein bar. That is a nightmare for digestion, especially between meals. So so once you get to the window of 4 hours, then you can kind of come to the understanding, come to notice that if you do that with comfort, you come to something called metabolic flexibility. And once you have that metabolic flexibility, your body is able to go these highs and lows, and able to also be intelligent and be energy efficient in using either carbohydrates or fats for burning energy, depending on the situation. So different moments in our life require either fat or carbohydrate, kind of the carbs to burn. Carbs are burned when we launch in more action than just a baseline fat burning state. So when we are in peace and calm and quiet and safe and comfortable, our baseline is fat burning. So fat is converted to glucose, and glucose is then burnt in the cells. But then when we have an extra need for energy, something like exercise, or you do more kind of brain work and so on, then the glucose is being converted, the liver starts the system starts asking for more glucose, and then carbohydrates are burned, and so the fasting, small intermittent fasting rhythm with 4 hours between meals and 5, no eating after 5 o'clock, will eventually, if you move there gradually, will eliminate that unease that comes from low sugar states where you can't focus, or you feel really lightheaded, or just malaise, that just can't function. You're taken out of functionality. So that is not a good thing. And if you try to avoid that situation by constantly snacking, you're keeping your blood sugar levels high constantly. And this is a very dangerous scenario. And this is the, the real problem which happens is that constantly the sugar levels are high in blood, and you've got, a cell in here and sugar's coming in high quantities. And the insulin, needs to be introduced into this process to let the sugar go into the cell. And so, the more there's bombarding, the sugar, the cells become resistant. There's insulin resistance. They don't open anymore. And so that all that blood, is filled in with this sugar, excess sugar. And what happens then is that sugar is converted to fat. And obviously more sugar in the blood also causes more inflammation. So you get these chronic inflammatory states easily. And the next step is metabolic disorder. And the next step is type 2 diabetes. So constant high of sugar, because we have to keep it now because I can't tolerate the low, is a very unhealthy scenario. It's old school, understanding on how to keep blood sugar levels, safe. You need to be able to be metabolically flexible and energy efficient to manage any situation, any challenges in life, and enjoy the moments of rest and then properly.
I think especially as we age. So when we're younger, I think we can get away with it a little bit more about eating at different times and eating later. But as we get older, we really need to have a plan at that point. We have to drop that, especially that late night snacking really doesn't serve us when we're going into our 40s and plus there. That's really when we see the rise of diabetes happening a lot in our societies. And I can also almost always pinpoint with a client when they're borderline diabetic. They're always late night snacking, or they're not able to leave space between meals. We even see that sometimes people get like acid starts to rise when they go longer than 4 hours without eating, and that kind of freaks them out. So they, again, going for the snacks, they're like, I can't do the intermittent fasting because I get acidic.
And the acidity is caused by the snacking.
It's a vicious cycle.
Exactly. So the acidity, in fact, in these cases is not hydrochloric acid. It's fermented food. Because if you constantly snack, your agni is really low. And when food moves down slowly, there's more time for bacteria to attack it. So bacteria are great, they need it in that process, but when the food moves down really slowly, then bacteria have more time, they start proliferating, they increase in quantity, in other words, and then they become bad bacteria. And generally, good or bad bacteria causes gas, And what does it mean it causes gas? It's fermenting. So when fermentation happens, food becomes acidic. So it's really the acidified food matter that is coming up. And that means that there's too little hydrochloric acid. So there's low agni. On a low agni, you start snacking. Food starts moving down really slowly. Bacteria come in and then ferment. And then start even kind of putrefying the food. It's like it, and then you have really bad breath as well. So lots of people, medicate themselves because they have acidity. They take Nexium or other, antacids. And what they do is they actually get the agni even lower because hydrochloric acid goes down with these antacids. So they're perpetuating the problem. And a little bit of food may help acidity, but just momentarily, it's back again. And vicious cycle, constantly feeding the acidity to form. So what you need to do in acidity is stop eating. Do not eat, and find the ways to gradually and safely do that. And you can't eat yourself healthy out of any gut issue. You can't eat yourself healthy. This is something people also kind of often think, that they need to eat something healthy to become healthy. No, you have to stop eating first and then start eating foods that nourish your guts in the right way. And depending what the problem is there slow guts, full of gunk, or is there fast gut, or is it acidified? Is it inflamed? You know, what is going on in there? But first, if you have a gut issue or any, you know, health issue, stop eating.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And you mentioned fermentation, so I hope I'm not going off topic here, but that's actually asked about sometimes, especially when we're teaching Ayurveda at, you know, when we have a student group there at the Institute. They'll ask, so for fermentation and fermented foods are kind of like on the no-no list for Ayurveda in some of these sort of classical textbooks. Let's call them classical textbooks, like based out of California. So yeah, they often talk about, you know, fermented foods are not really like included in the Ayurvedic diet, but we know that fermented foods really help with our gut flora. So, you know, of course, we have to look at the seasons, what seasons we're eating fermented food in, what type of fermented food is it? Is it a cooling food that's been fermented, or is it a spicy food that's been fermented?
Mm.
Do you have anything extra to add to that?
Yeah, fermented foods are side orders. Yeah, they're condiments. You know, just to have, of course, you know, you can find a few, you know, dishes that use fermented food as a whole, such as, you know, Germans, they have a sausage and you know, sauerkraut. So there's quite,
Yeah,
but still, it's not like
the
eating
whole
a
dish.
massive amount of, you know, just sauerkraut or kimchi or something like that. Fermented foods are always side orders. So the yogurt should be a dollop of yogurt in your khichdi or whatever you putting it. Your fermented food should be there to, you know, kind of give a little bit of kick. They're not supposed to be main, you know, bulk of the food. And in fact, like you said, it's a seasonal thing. If you think about gunas, the season's foods are always, you know, in opposition to the climatic gunas. So if winter is cold, dry, and light, then fermented foods are heating, heavy, and liquid. They'll often, you know, promote, you know, saliva, as you know. So anyway, so in winters, the fermented food are fantastic, you know, and cheese, like cheese is fermented. Cheese is a winter thing, like seasoned cheeses. Fresh cheeses are summer thing because they don't have the acidity element as the fermented elements as, you know, winter cheeses. But yeah, there's fermented foods. If you say they're not really in the Ayurvedic diet, it's the wrong kind of statement, and it's the wrong kind of statement generally to say this is not in an Ayurvedic diet, because everything is Ayurvedic if you know how to. There's, because you go about, you know, went about the gunas last week, because there is no such thing that doesn't have gunas. And if something has gunas, it means it has a healing potential, but it has also a disease potential or imbalance potential.
It's all about dosage. It all comes down to dosage amounts.
Yes.
You know, it's the same with herbs. Some herbs are beneficial in small dose, and some will kill you in large dose. But yes, so I have noticed this in some of the sort of more American Ayurveda textbooks. They kind of like talk about fermented foods as being like a no-no. And I'm trying to sort of teach people like, well, it has its place actually, because as you said, because it does have gunas, it does fit into Ayurveda. And for example, we have found this really wonderful fermented rose petals available here in Finland at one of the local health food shops.
Wow.
So I have that in the summer. So it's cooling, right? Rose petals are cooling, but then you have a little ferment on the side of your dish sometimes, you know, rather than doing like sauerkraut in summer, you know, or blue cheese or something really heavy, doing like a nice light rose petal ferment. So looking at the qualities of what the fermented food is before it's fermented.
Absolutely. I've got a pomegranate molasses. So like a bit like balsamic vinegar, but it's made out of pomegranate juice. So it's really beautiful. Summer condiment for your salads. And I also made a really nice sticky chicken. You know, I'm not a vegetarian. I absolutely eat, you know, mainly vegetarian, but you know, made these beautiful chicken legs with very sticky pomegranate molasses, you know, kind of sauce into it. It was so nice, very summery, in fact.
Yeah, I love molasses, and I've been sort of campaigning for molasses in Finland, like trying to get more shops to sell it, because it's my daughter uses it, for example, instead of ketchup. she will dip, I make these
Yeah, yeah,
Indian pancakes, and she'll
yeah,
dip it into the molasses rather than the ketchup. At least she's getting,
yeah,
vitamins and minerals from the
yeah,
molasses.
yeah. And it's a
So I
nice,
think it's
yeah,
wonderful. And that pomegranate molasses I make
mm,
a lot too. It's
yeah,
so good for salads. It's one of my favorite dressings.
yeah.
But yeah, we kind of went off tangent with the fermented here, but yeah, I wanted to hear your thoughts on that because, like it is this fermentation process when people are over snacking, like you said. So I think it does fit in there. And there's that acidity that's coming. But I guess sort of conclusion on the intermittent fasting. And maybe we could talk a little bit about longer term fasting, a little bit. What are some thoughts there? So
Yeah, yeah.
I've personally haven't done like a 5-day fast before myself, like a super long. How about you? Is this something that you have tried in the past
Yeah,
before?
yeah. I mean, I'm familiar with 36-hour fast, and or once I've done 48-hour fast, but because my job just doesn't allow me to do longer fasts. I've got a physical work, job, massaging people and running a business and being a mum and householder. So there's lots of roles that just really won't
Yeah.
allow me to do that. So I do small intermittent fasting. Yeah. So after I eat twice a day. So I have breakfast and lunch at 2 around, and then I don't eat much at all later in the evening. So that's mine. But the thing is that if you go into longer fasts, you need to have a fasting muscle to do that. So it's like any other muscle. You need to make it stronger, but with practice. If you haven't fasted ever, you should never try a longer fast. Even a 1-day fast might be really stressful. And this is really important to understand, that fast can go stress. And if your body is in stress, the last thing it's going to leave is fat and the toxins.
Exactly.
Mm.
And the 48 hours, yeah, I think is kind of common amongst us sort of yogis and Ayurveda practitioners, is sort of like our comfort level
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
doing. Of course, I've met people who have done longer.
Mm,
They're definitely, at some ashram in India, they're not working while they're there because,
mm,
yeah, like you said, you really can't be like kind of like doing householder duties
yeah.
or business duties when you're in that kind of longer term fasting. But
Yeah.
yeah, the intermittent fasting seems to work for us as moms and also as
Mm,
entrepreneurs. But
yeah.
I get questions a lot about like kids, because kids like to snack a lot, right? Like they're always asking for snacks between meals, and parents are often asking, well, like, is that good? Is it good for their teeth? Is it good for the blood sugar level? And, I think kids are a little bit different situation. Their Agni is different than an older adult. But I think fruits, I usually recommend fruits as the in-between
Yeah.
snacks. Like we have a pretty strict rule, like fruit is the only
Yeah.
snack
Yeah. I
at
agree.
our place. Yeah, you agree with that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So first of all, snacks should never be a pacifier. So if food,
Mhm.
that's the wrong thing to do. So to pacify child the food, and so get them used to the fact, like I see lots of mothers doing that, just and getting them into condition them for later in life to be able to not be able to come off this snacking rhythm, because and then all the related issues, health issues are there at stake. But the yeah, fruit, even though it's sweet, but it has the fiber. So if you have sugar with fiber, you're fine. So if you have, but if you have, so therefore you should always have fruit as fruit and not necessarily as a juice, even if it's a fresh press, unless it's some occasional thing. But the fruit is fantastic because even if it has the sugar, it still has always the fiber to downplay the effects of sugar peaks. So that's exactly, I'm happy to hear that. That's fruits are the only ones, only snacks in your,
Mhm.
yeah, for kids, they are a little bit different. So let's say,
Yeah, they're quite,
yeah,
and they are demanding with the snacks. We
yeah,
do fresh juices, but I always add to apple, for example, just a hint of carrot and ginger into my daughter's juice, and she doesn't even
yeah,
really notice it's there.
yeah,
Like you
yeah,
have to sort of play with the amounts and sort of
yeah,
test your kid's palate, but you
yeah,
can sneak vegetables into your
absolutely,
kid's fruit
yeah,
juice. And
absolutely,
of course, there's thoughts that we shouldn't be mixing fruits and vegetables together, that they should be separate. But there's also the thought when something is like a smoothie or a juice, it's processed down enough, it's liquefied enough, maybe is a better word to say,
mm,
that, carrot and apple and ginger, for example, would be an okay
yeah.
combination.
But these rules, you shouldn't combine, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. They apply to people with weak Agni. Yeah, they are made for people with weak Agni. So if you say, oh no, you shouldn't combine, fruits at the meal. Yeah, you can occasionally do that if your Agni is strong. But if your Agni is weak, then you have to start picking up all these rules, of food combinations. But generally, if you do right food timing, so you just have 4 hours between meals, you can pretty much eat anything. Seasonal, organic, and local. That's it.
I would maybe say melon as like an exception with some
I
of the
do agree.
fruits
Yeah,
with
melon.
food.
Yeah.
Melon, I would say, yeah, if this Agni is strong, you can do fruit, but please don't do melon right after eating a meal. That's going to be, I think, a disaster for everybody. Yeah.
We've all
Melon has its own
experienced
special.
that.
And there's what's that Italian dish where it's like melon wrapped in like bacon or prosciutto or something? Yeah.
Yeah, I always go like, oh my God.
Yeah. And people are always like, but there's that Italian dish that doesn't look very Ayurvedic. And I'm like, well, I mean, there's lots of great Italian food, but it's true they're not following Ayurvedic principles, but maybe their Agni is strong enough that they can handle that
Actually, they do
occasionally.
quite a lot. I mean, traditional Mediterranean diet is very Ayurvedic. It's seasonal. It has always been like organic, and it's always local. They love their local. And they know seasonality. They have light breakfast, hefty lunch, early, light dinner. That's what and this is the Ayurvedic diet.
That's a very good point that
And that's why
the
Mediterranean diet,
times and the meal sizes are very
yeah,
specific. Yeah.
yeah.
So I think maybe the prosciutto and melon is their little exception
Yeah,
there.
it's their treat. It's their treat. They don't have it every day.
Yeah.
It's a very delicate, very appreciated treat. I never got into it, even though I lived in Italy for 5 years. I never understood what is the thing about this. But anyway, so that's why Mediterranean diets has always been vouched for being one of the healthiest diets in the world, because they live Ayurvedically.
Yeah, without maybe even realizing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, I need to go.
Yeah. Okay. Good
But
chat.
lovely to just chat with you again, and we'll see you next time.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. This podcast has been brought to you by Anu Paavola and Justin Cederberg, both Ayurvedic practitioners. The information provided in this podcast is for general information purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider regarding any medical condition or concerns you may have.